Well, a potential summit between the United States and North Korea may be back on. We welcome you back to the second hour on this Memorial Day edition of Happening Now. It's good to be with you. I'm Connell McShane.
And I'm Arthel Neville. Officials from the U.S. and North Korea are meeting at the DMZ to discuss issues leading up to a potential meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. This as Kim held a surprise meeting Saturday with South Korean President Moon Jae-in to discuss the potential summit and denuclearization. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palkot is in Seoul, South Korea right now with more. Hi, Greg.
Arthel, we are tracking intensifying talks throughout this region in the run-up to a possible summit between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. At the scene of that surprise summit this past weekend between Kim and South Korean President Moon Jae-in on the North Korean side of the DMZ, a U.S. team is seeing how willing Pyongyang really is to denuclearize. Word, for example, Monday in their state media is that they would do it on their, quote, own timetable. The U.S. team is headed up by the current U.S. ambassador to the Philippines, a longtime North Korea State Department hand, Korean-American Sung Kim. On the North Korean side, a very powerful Vice Foreign Minister, Cho Sung-hui. She is the one who last week in an explosive statement called Vice President Pence a political dummy. And in Singapore right now, according to a variety of reports, another U.S. team led this time by the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Joe Hagan, reportedly will be joined by North Korean officials. They'll be working on logistics, the nuts and bolts of a possible meeting in that venue. Again, all sides in the last couple of days, we're talking about North Korean leader Kim, talking about President Trump, talking like that a summit will actually be happening. The devil, however, in all of these things is in the strategic details, and that's what's being worked on right now. Arthel.
Greg Palkot, thank you very much. Connell.
All right, Arthel, we're joined now to talk a little bit more about this by Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood, who served 2 decades in the Marines and is the Senior Research Fellow now for Defense Programs at Heritage. Good to see you, Colonel. It is, it's looking to Greg's point like, I guess, we might be back on for this summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. What do you make of the way the president's handled the back and forth here?
Well, I mean, he's held to his previous points on many negotiating areas, so you have to be willing to walk away to show that you're serious about the objectives that you've laid out. So if he continued to concede, if he gave all these concessions, et cetera, then it gives North Korea the upper hand, clear and away. So I think by saying, look, this isn't working out in our interests, we're going to walk away from this thing. Well, we saw then this flurry of activity of people trying to keep the summit on. So the fact that they're back talking again shows that it was a good move, and this maximum pressure along with the desire to talk, I think, is only a positive thing.
Yeah, it gets it back on your terms would be the argument. Let me go to James Clapper for a moment, the former Director of National Intelligence, as you know, has been no fan, let's put it that way, of this president, especially in recent months. But this is what he said about this topic. Take a listen.
Having gone this far, there's value in meeting and greeting, gripping and grinning, and just establishing a rapport. I think, yes, I think it would be important to have the summit.
Clapper went on to say, Colonel, that Kim Jong-un may have met his match in our unconventional president, as he referred to President Trump. What do you make of that?
Well, I think traditional gets you traditional results. So if we're not happy with a nuclear North Korea and many other locations in the world that has been the result of the conventional diplomacy, you have an unconventional approach, as the foreign policy community would view this, and you're getting results that are different. And I think that's what everybody wants. So to Clapper's point, people are talking. Why isn't that a good thing? And you'll have to feel their way out, as they move forward on this thing. They've got that June 12th as a target date. They're not beholden to it, but certainly it gives you something to discuss. And the fact that we have teams on the ground in both locations, Singapore and they're in the DMZ area, and the North Koreans are meeting with Chinese and South Koreans, these are all very good things. And I think it's a tribute to the president's approach to how he's handling this.
So let's just say then that it does happen on June 12th or right around that time. You spoke about results. I mean, those are results in setting up these talks and having conversations. But what about when the summit actually takes place in Singapore and the president meets with Kim Jong-un? What are results? What would results mean to you in terms of what he comes home with?
I think an additional opportunity to continue talks. I mean, truly, I don't think it's realistic to expect that everybody is going to get everything they want at the first meeting between the leaders of the United States and North Korea, since the Korean War. So the idea that they get together in the room, they'll both measure each other up. There'll be a lot of background discussions between the teams on either side. They'll consult allies and all that. So, this idea that you're getting together and talking, I think it will probably lead to additional discussions and not some kind of ultimate conclusion.
But a commitment to, quote unquote, denuclearize, does that need to be up front, or is that something that we lead up to? And there's been a lot of discussion about what that even means, that both sides see it differently.
Right. Yeah, I think your point right there is where it comes down to is, what do you really mean by denuclearize? Everybody takes everything off the table, the departure of U.S. troops. What does it mean in terms of the North Korean program? Do they allow international inspectors coming in? Mm-hmm. So those points will have to be discussed, and what that really defines, and then subsequent discussions would get into the details.
I mean, that is what it means, though, right? All in, no nuclear weapons, and you allow inspectors to come in and look to see whether or not you're honoring those agreements. That's what denuclearization is to us, right?
To us, yes. From the United States side, we are not quite sure what the North Koreans view of this in the final result. All
right. So it looks like the betting is now that President Trump has put himself in a position to do this. Now, the question, as you said, is what kind of results you can expect once he goes there. What role does China play in all of this? It seemed as if the Chinese had really upset this president in the way that they had that secret meeting or that extra meeting with Kim Jong-un.
And yet the United States, through President Trump, is trying to help out, in some business dealings, negotiations, et cetera. So, it's a multifaceted problem. You're not going to be happy with some aspects. You're happy with other aspects. Certainly the economic card and continued support and trade between North Korea and China is a major issue, on the table here. So even though if the rest of the world isn't doing economic relationships with North Korea, as long as they've got a lifeline to China, it keeps North Korea afloat. So I think it's a wild card there.
No sign the Chinese are pulling that back at all. Despite, there's a lot of pressure on them too, economic pressure that the United States is putting on them, but they've, if anything, seem to be still fairly close to North Korea, right?
Yeah, well, it's your next door neighbor. So how could they not continue to have relationships with them and the other countries in that region? So again, there's a lot of irons in the fire here, and people are going to have to feel their way going forward. An unconventional president in the United States, a leader in China who's essentially leader for life now. So these players aren't going away, and they're having to figure out in the multilateral sets of relationships in the Asia region how all these things play out. How does it affect relationships with Japan, Chinese militarization of the South China Sea, South Korea? All these are issues in the back of everyone's mind, and they're trying to feel their way forward.
All right. Great to have all your time today, Colonel. What is the final point? You're saying this is on, right, for June 12th? If you were a betting man, I don't know if you are.
Yeah, I think it is. With teams on the ground, I'd place a bet in that direction, sure.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you today.
Thank you.
All right, Arthel.
Okay, Connell, let's get caught up on some weather now as subtropical storm Alberto is closing in on the Gulf Coast. People there bracing for the impact. The first named storm of the season, keeping many Americans indoors this holiday weekend. Jonathan Seri, he's outdoors. He's live in Pensacola Beach with the latest. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Arthel. Behind me, you can see there are still some hardcore beachgoers here, but conditions are beginning to deteriorate as the storm gets closer to shore. We've been experiencing some rain on and off, and occasionally we get some heavy gusts. Governor Rick Scott recently delivered an update on the storm. Here's what he said.
We've got gusts up to almost 60 miles an hour, maybe a little bit more. We're going to get some rain. We have a chance for flash flooding. We got a chance for tornadoes in the Panhandle especially, but we're getting rain around the state.
Much of the Florida Panhandle is under a storm surge watch. Some cities and counties have been helping residents fill sandbags to protect homes and businesses against water levels that could reach as much as 4 feet above ground in some parts of the watch area. Here on Pensacola Beach, red flags are warning people to stay out of the water because of dangerous rip currents. Although Memorial Day vacationers are spending more time indoors than they had initially planned, many are taking this storm in stride.
Well, we just enjoy shopping, and I like sitting out on the balcony in the rain and reading a good book and watching the waves, and I guess the weather will make them higher and make them sound better.
Do you worry at all?
No.
Several years back, we had a place at Panama City Beach, and we actually stayed down. Was it a 1 or a 2?
Yeah, it was a 1, I think.
It was a 1.
Category 1 hurricane.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was terrific. It was beautiful, actually.
How about you? Any concerns with the tropical storm coming?
Not at all.
Why not?
Not at all. As long as they're happy, I'm happy.
And of course, tropical storms are always a reality during the summer in Florida, but some vacationers were caught by surprise because it's actually arriving 4 days before the official start of hurricane season. Arthel?
Jonathan Sari, thank you very much.
Meantime, we have a disaster unfolding in an area devastated by floods less than 2 years ago.
It's different this time, and I think everybody's going to have a lot of discussions and talk about where we go from here.
And we do take you live to this waterlogged community as it struggles yet again to recover, plus new comments from the president's attorney about the Russia investigation on whether there will be a Trump-Mueller interview.
The president's not going to fire him because that would be playing into their hands of playing, victim, Watergate. They're the Watergate. They're the people who have committed the crimes.
So a worker at a Little Caesars pizza shop in Florida shot and killed a would-be robber in a clown mask on Saturday night. Police say the robber attacked the worker with scissors as he was leaving the restaurant, and before the worker pulled out a concealed gun, got off several shots. Authorities releasing this picture of the type of mask that the robber was wearing. The worker only suffered minor injuries in that attack.
I mean, the reality is we're not going to sit him down if this is a trap for perjury. And until we're convinced of that. And if they don't show us these documents, well, we just going to have to say no.
So it sounds like a Trump-Mueller interview may not happen, at least according to the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, or will it?
It could happen. He wants to do it. So far, since I've been in this, all I see are obstacles that they're putting in the way.
So joining us now, Gary Gerstenfield, a federal white-collar defense attorney and trial attorney. Thank you for being here, Gary. I want to start with this. How could a sit-down interview with special counsel Mueller be a perjury trap for the president?
Oh, very, very simple. You have to remember a couple things. First of all, it's easier hurting pussycats than it is trying to control what President Trump is going to say. I think that's a fair statement that almost everybody would agree with. And so you have to understand what a material misrepresentation is. So anytime that you make a statement to a police officer or to a federal agent, you're making a difference. To a police officer, that's not a crime, but to a federal agent, it is. And a material misrepresentation can be anything that is different than what the federal agents know to be an accurate piece of information. So if Donald Trump starts to talk and says something that goes off the charts from what he was expected to say, that information can be used against him for calling it basically lying to a federal agent.
Mr. Giuliani saying that the president wants to clear his name with Mr. Mueller. So how much does the will of the president weigh in this scenario?
Well, I think that's absolutely true. I think Donald Trump is biting at the bit to get in front of Mueller and to say what he wants to say, which is there was no collusion and that he did not conspire with the Russians to try to affect the 2016 campaign. As a matter of fact, the election in his mind has been thwarted by the fact that there's been these accusations that there's been some sort of an explanation as to why he won over Hillary Clinton. So he wants to get in front of the press, and he wants to get in front of certainly Mueller, and he wants to get in front of anybody and tell his side of the story. The problem is that it's the little things that are gotchas, which is what his lawyers are very much afraid of.
But if the president just keeps to the facts and the truth, then there will be no gotchas.
Well, the gotchas would be things like, for example, Paul Manafort. When did he know that Paul Manafort was a problem? For example, the biggest thing, of course, is General Flynn. When he had the now infamous meeting with fired FBI Director Comey, he basically tried to get Comey to, quote, lay off. And the question is, what did he know? When did he know? And what would he say when asked about that in front of, again, federal investigators who already have a view of the information that they believe is accurate?
So if the president does or does not sit down with Mr. Mueller, how does that impact Mueller's investigation either way?
Well, probably in terms of determining whether or not there was actual collusion, probably not. The end of an investigation typically is when you bring in the big guy. So Donald Trump coming in and actually speaking is really the last part of the investigation. Now, here's the big challenge that he has. There are two options as far as giving statements to federal investigators. One is to sit down and have a conversation like you and I, where you're asking questions, I'm just giving answers. And the other one is what we call written questions and written answers. For example, Ronald Reagan with the Iran-Contra scandal, he gave written answers after a big contested issue because they actually wanted to come in and testify, and that wasn't going to happen. So Ronald Reagan gave written answers. In contrast with Bill Clinton, he gave, in fact, he spoke to grand jury as well as to private, as well as to a special counsel. So that's the difference. Bill Clinton on one end, Ronald Reagan on the other. And Donald Trump would like to be more like Ronald Reagan.
Well, in the case of President Trump, which would give a better impression, public impression, for the president if he were to actually sit down face to face and speak with Mr. Mueller, or if he were to submit written answers?
Short term or long term? Short term, the answer is getting out there in front and speaking the way he does, like his rallies, where he gets out there and he talks and he has these great moments and connects with people. So in the short term, that. In the long term, the problem is the gotchas. So in terms of what Giuliani wants, if, in fact, there is ever going to be a time where he sits down with the Mueller folks, it's absolutely going to be written questions, written answers. Not as dramatic, not as beautiful, but long-term wise, probably a lot more sustaining for his presidency.
Gary Gerstenfeld, we have to leave it there. Thank you.
All right. As we all pause this Memorial Day to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice, family members of one fallen hero are shedding tears of joy.
I burst into tears. I couldn't believe it.
We have the story of this World War II bomber pilot and why his relatives are finally getting closure.
Colombia's presidential election is heading into a divisive runoff that could impact a peace deal. In the South American nation, conservative candidate and one-time Senator Ivan Duque took first place last night, but he fell short of the 50% vote needed to avoid another round. In second, former rebel Gustavo Petro, a leftist who backs a 2016 peace treaty with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. Duque vows to rewrite that treaty, which ended a 50-year war that killed more than 200,000 people.
On this Memorial Day, the family of one fallen airman finally finding some new comfort in the memory of their hero who never came home from the battlefield. The recent discovery of a warplane that crashed during World War II, giving them some long-awaited information on their loved one's final resting place. Claudia Cowan live today in Livermore, California with that story for us. Claudia?
Well, Connell, on March 11th, 1944, Lieutenant Tom Kelly was releasing bombs from a B-24 like this one behind me when his plane was shot down and lost in the Pacific. But 74 years later, a remarkable discovery has solved the mystery of what happened to Lieutenant Kelly and his crew and their plane named Heaven Can Wait.
Good copy. We got wreckage in view.
The bomber's watery grave was recently discovered by Project Recover, a team of military historians and marine scientists who search for the wreckage of combat aircraft and bring closure to the families of Americans listed as missing in action.
There is a moment of elation of finding the missing aircraft, and at the same time, you're immediately humbled knowing that this is a grave site.
I burst into tears. I couldn't believe it.
Diane Christie never met her Uncle Tommy. Lieutenant Kelly was just 21 when he died in the crash, but his handwritten letters home are filled with humor and honor. The men fighting here for everyone are doing it for your freedom, he wrote. Years of research by his family, including flight documents and eyewitness accounts, pointed Project Recovery in the right direction. And after an 18-day search, the remarkable discovery
I will read the names that were lost on that day.
Was followed by a gesture of gratitude.
The bomber, Second Lieutenant Thomas V. Kelly. Gunner, Staff Sergeant Donald W. Bird.
When they folded the flag for all 11 crew members and said their name and passed them down, it was just, it was the utmost of respect and honor. We appreciated that so much.
And Lieutenant Kelly's family will receive one of those flags and now hope that military officials will return to that wreckage there and retrieve any remains so that they can bury Lieutenant Tom Kelly here in Livermore, where he was born and raised. Connell.
74 years later. That is truly remarkable. Claudia Cowan, thanks. Arthel.
Indeed it is, Connell. Raging floodwaters overrunning the streets of a historic city in Maryland, and people there suffering a serious blow as the cleanup begins. Plus, the president's plan to lower prescription drug prices, does it pass muster? We're going to take a closer look at that straight ahead.
For those of us that have come from the private sector, we always want to see things move faster. But, you know, some of the things that we've already done, I think, are important and that we're already starting to see some progress.
And welcome back. Floodwaters are starting to recede in Ellicott City, Maryland, which is good news. But as they do, they reveal the sheer scale of the devastation there. One person reported missing. This less than 2 years after their last flood killed 2 people.
You know, every time it rains hard, you know, you say a Hail Mary and hope it's not the time. And here we are. It was the time.
Rich Edson is live in Ellicott City with the very latest. Hi, Rich.
Hey, good afternoon, Arthel. And police say they are still searching for the 39-year-old missing man, Edison Herman of Severn. It's a town close here to Ellicott City in Maryland. According to a number of local reports, he is in the Army Reserve, National Guard, and police have been searching for him since he was eating at a restaurant last seen around 5 o'clock in the afternoon at a restaurant on the street, but basically right back here in Main Street. There have been salvage crews here since the morning. If you look at this tunnel here where the stream is going through, just a couple of hours ago, there were rescue crews or salvage crews pulling from there a tree, a dumpster, and 3 separate cars. There were cars littered all throughout here. And in fact, if you see the path that salvage crews took some of the cars out through this backyard, the water had reached, according to residents here, that first porch there, destroying much of what came through here. So on top of that, we talked to the owner of that house, the purple house right in front of you. She said she was driving down the street about 15 minutes before the flooding began.
And I thought, wow, town looks great. Lots of people. It was great to see a couple of buildings that had been under rehab from the prior flood were making some progress, and that was a great sign. And boy, 2 hours later, I came down here and I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
That prior flood was less than 2 years ago, in July of 2016, a very similar situation as we had last evening here in Ellicott City. Several inches of rain over a few hours, and then a flood cascaded through, a flash flood through the downtown area, destroying many of the businesses, many of the cars, many of the homes down here. Same thing here. In 2016, there were tens of millions of dollars in damage. 2 people were killed. They haven't assessed exactly how much this is going to cost yet. 24 hours ago, this was a bustling downtown. If you look at the area behind me, this was a parking lot with about a dozen and a half cars this morning. Crews have cleared all of that mud and that soot and the dozen-plus cars from that area. People have been down here looking to see what's happened to their businesses, what's happened to their homes. We talked to one man who started a brewery about 21 years ago. He said he just celebrated that anniversary, and 3 weeks ago he had just finished repairs from the 2016 flood. Arthel?
So tough. Rich Edson, thank you very much.
We have some new information coming in today on President Trump's plan to lower prescription drug prices. His Health and Human Services Secretary is set to testify about that next month. That'll be the first time that lawmakers will get to publicly examine the president's proposal. So, how will it affect seniors? Our own Dr. Mark Siegel spoke with the president's point person on all of this, and in that on-camera exclusive, she announced a new program for price transparency and then explained how it would work.
The first thing that we want to do is increase competition, because we know when there's more competition that patients win, prices go down. So that's where we're starting, with increasing competition overall. And then secondly is increasing the negotiating power of our PBMs and our health plans. And because we know if they're able to use the tools that are available to them in the private market, we're going to have better prices for our consumers.
All right, let's get to Dr. Siegel now. He's a professor of medicine at NYU's Langone Center and a Fox News medical correspondent. Always good to see you. Get right into what we heard there. More competition is going to be better. How's this all going to work?
Connell, it's really important because she was saying that we could have all the innovation in the world, and we have plenty of great innovation making us live longer, healthier lives. But if folks can't afford their medications, it's not very helpful. So she brought out the drug dashboard. Administrator Verma is talking about the drug dashboard, where 3,000 drugs are now seen. You can see their list prices if you're a senior or you're on Medicaid. You could see how much they went up in the past year. Right. Drugs like Zyrtec up almost 20%. Something like Enbrel, which is an arthritis drug, up almost 20%. $2,700 per year for that drug now. Diabetes drugs, cholesterol drugs, all skyrocketing. And then I said, okay, now you know the prices. Now you know what the manufacturer's charging, who's chiseling. What do we do about it?
Right. If you know the price, that's one thing. But then how does the price actually come down?
Exactly. So that's when she said, and you brought this point up in the intro, they showed her saying this, the government is bringing in negotiators. They're bringing in their own middlemen to take over, and instead of the middlemen making profits, the profits go to the senior. She gave me one example where last year alone, hospitals were keeping the money and charging seniors more in the end. The government has now saved, Medicare, Medicaid has saved seniors about $320 million already just with this new approach.
When this plan was first announced, one of the criticisms that came in from Democrats is that the president didn't go far enough. And for example, there was, at least as it was reported, no ability for Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Talk a little bit about that, if you can, and what they actually can do under the plan versus what they can't do.
So it's not entirely true that Medicare can't negotiate prices. I'll tell you why. Because under Part D and Part B, there's many drugs where private sector is brought in already. But you find when you look at this that if you have private insurance, you're getting a lower price, you have a lower copay. Government, again, is bringing people in to negotiate those prices. The FDA is bringing in more generic drugs, so there's more competition, more choice to bring those prices down. The key here, Connell, is for the senior or the poor person or disabled person to pay less out of pocket. And that's where this is heading. So there is some negotiation with Medicare, not across the board, but under Part D and Part B, yes.
Okay, so there will be a little bit of negotiation. I suppose that's good. There will be more competition, which I would suppose is good as well, as what she was talking about in your interview there. How do they make that work? Because that's one of the big issues, right? A generic actually being able to get to market and provide that competition. Well, what changes are being made?
Okay, first of all, FDA is allowing way more generics to be approved. Over 1,000 last year, the most ever on record. You know why? Generic companies now no longer have to redo the research that brand names put out there to get the drug approved in the first place. So there's going to be a flood of way more drugs approved. The second thing is that the middlemen, like pharmacy benefit managers, were busy lowering the price for you, but guess what? They took the profit and you ended up paying a large copay, or the remainder went to you. Now, Medicare and Medicaid for seniors and for Medicaid patients are going to do the negotiating for you so that you are going to have a lot less to pay out of pocket. After all, that's what we all want, right? We want to pay less out of pocket.
Yeah, of course. When will this change take effect for people who are Medicare and Medicaid recipients who may be watching today and say, boy, I am really getting hammered with the cost increases I've had to pay over a number of years? When will things actually change?
Some of it started already. As I said, $320 million already saved in hospitals. Some of it's occurring in 2018. The biggest bulk of this is in 2019. You're going to see this hit. And if it all works, you're going to have lower prices and way lower out-of-pocket costs. This is a big step. You know, with all that criticism, oh, this is not a very substantial plan. When I really looked at it and when I interviewed her, I felt it was
Well,
substantial.
I think that's really interesting to hear, because one of the things I noticed on the day of, right, when the announcement was made, the stock prices for many of the drug companies actually went up, which was somewhat surprising to people, because they looked at this and said, boy, aren't they going to make less money because of this? And the analysts came back and they said, no, you know what, this doesn't really affect their profits that much. And I think that's where some of that criticism came from, that it didn't go far enough.
Well, one thing that remains to be seen here, that's a very fair point. One thing that remains to be seen is President Trump said he's not going to allow foreign countries anymore to set a lower price and say this is all we're paying, and then here in the United States we pay more. He says he's going to put a stop to that. He's already started that in other sectors and other areas. If he does that, I think then you might see drug company prices drop.
Really drop. But you do think this makes a difference. It's good to see you today. Thanks,
Good to see you, Connell.
Dr. Mark Siegel. All right, Arthel.
Connell, thank you. And on this Memorial Day, we want to tell you about our service members who rumble around the battlefield in heavily armored vehicles. While the transports may save them from an IED detonation, getting out of the mangled vehicle safely is a different challenge. Leland Vittert tells us how they prepare.
This is designed to simulate a training scenario in case your vehicle rolls, hits an IED, some kind of damage of that sort.
If you were to roll into a canal, give me real-world stories of what happened to your guys over there and how this helps that.
Real world, one of these vehicles rolls, let's say on a serpentine, goes down, a lot of armor on that thing, that's a lot of weight thrown around, landing at a weird angle. You don't know what doors are crushed, what doors are open. You got a lot of pieces in there moving around. Your Marines are disoriented. They're going to have to get out of there quickly, especially when you're talking about a body of water. We developed this system to train.
Roll over!
Allows us to roll over at a variety of angles. The operator outside will unlock a door. You have to find the door and get out. It increases your comfort and your familiarity with getting out of a vehicle, especially once you've been disoriented in a rollover situation.
There's sort of this balance here, because throughout the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, you learned that Humvees were more vulnerable to IEDs and to ambushes. You add armor and you get into an MRAP, and then all of a sudden you have the risk of rollovers go up.
You can't negate casualties or risk or incidents. You have to mitigate. I'd rather have a rollover vehicle with a lower risk of injury to personnel where they're still alive in an armored situation than a lower bodied, unarmored vehicle or lightly armored vehicle where I don't know if my people are walking out of it or not.
How does this apply to a more conventional war? Be it North Korea, be it a NATO theater, those kind of places.
Right now, the big thing on the radar is hybrid warfare, which utilizes a cross of conventional tactics and these unconventional tactics. So we anticipate it's going to happen in the future as well in future campaigns.
And that was Leland Vittert reporting. Thanks, Leland.
All right, speaking out to help the troops on this Memorial Day, up next, we are going to hear from one combat veteran on how she's helping out her fellow soldiers when they return home. So Poland wants a permanent U.S. military presence and is willing to pony up as much as $2 billion in order to get it. Poland's defense minister saying the country needs American boots on the ground as protection from Russia after its annexation of Crimea and other hostile acts. Now, Warsaw says it's committed to sharing the burden of defense spending with the United States.
And as the nation observes Memorial Day, I'd like to introduce my next guest, a former sergeant in the Army. Kara Leidy was a driver in Iraq in the mid-2000s. During that time, she had to fend off a sexual assault. She now advocates for veterans taking care of their mental health when they come back home from combat. Kara Leidy tells her story as part of the This Is War podcast set to be released on Wednesday, and she joins us now. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Hello.
Kara, if you would, what would you say is the main part of your remarkable story that you wanted to share in the podcast?
I think for me, the biggest part about sharing my story is the relatability that anybody else might have. I know for me that coming out of the military, especially, you come home to largely a group of people that don't understand like what you've been through. So for me to share the intimate details of my experiences, it's my hope that whoever hears it knows that they have hope and that they're not alone.
In what ways do you feel that it has been most challenging for people to, be it your family, your friends, the people you see at the grocery store, to relate to you post-combat?
Post-combat, I know a lot of veterans, we're very stuck in our minds when we come home because we were trained to do things a certain way, and then to ask for help, it's a sign of weakness when you're active. So when you come home, it's almost like you don't know how to vocalize that with the people that you're close to, especially your family and friends that you knew before, because essentially to them, you know, it's two different people, the person they knew before you deployed versus the person that comes home.
Well, there's certainly nothing weak about what it is that you have done and continue to do. And I want to ask you, how challenging is it to care, for you to care for our returning combat vets? And do you also assist their families as well?
Basically, I've just kept up an outreach with the numerous people that I've served with personally, or anyone that I have met, you know, after the service that are veterans and, you know, we didn't serve together. I try to make it a good point to let them know that, you know, they have options. You know, it could be a friend, someone like myself. It could be, you know, their family, their loved ones, their spouse. It could be reaching out to, you know, the VA if they have VA benefits and they're going that route, or private care. You know, the biggest step for veterans coming home from overseas and just being deployed is knowing that they have things in place that they can go to if they need it.
Where do you find your personal strength?
I think I found my personal strengths and in my family, especially, and the people that have stood by me since I've came home. And especially with my veteran family, it's nice to know that you can pick up the phone 6 years after not seeing somebody and just saying, hey, like, do you've got time to listen? And they do, and that's leaps and bounds as far as progress. And, you know, for me, that's what I hold near and dear to my heart, is just knowing that the doors are open with those people.
And is there a message in particular that you'd like to send to our viewers on this Memorial Day weekend?
I'd like to say that, you know, Memorial Day is a time of remembrance, but it's also a time to, you know, hug the ones you love and be thankful for having the freedom to be able to do all the things that we do for Memorial Day. You know, it's more than cooking out and having fun. You know, just take a moment to realize the sacrifice that it took for us to have what we have.
Kara Leidy, I can't imagine the sacrifice. I thank you, for myself, for all of us here at Fox, and for all of our fellow Americans. You are a hero indeed, and continued success and continued health and recovery to you. Kara Leidy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll be right back.
We're back with a Fox News alert. Emergency crews are on high alert in Hawaii after lava from the erupting Kilauea volcano reached one of the wells in a geothermal power plant. Now, officials are assuring the public that well has been successfully sealed. Let's get to Jeff Paul live at the Big Island with the very latest. Jeff?
Well, the fear from some locals is that if this lava were to reach the power plant, there could be massive explosions or possibly releases of poisonous gas. But a lot is unknown right now because this hasn't happened before really anywhere. Now, as you take a look at this time lapse, this is the area near the power plant. Over the last 54 hours, it's condensed to about 5 seconds. Authorities feel confident the most vulnerable spots of that facility are sealed up. Lava has already covered one well pad, and the flows are getting closer to reaching another. Geologists say these same flows are incredibly unpredictable and moving faster not only towards this power plant, but near several homes, forcing more mandatory evacuations.
We say mandatory to kind of give it more strength, but we're not going to go drag anybody out of their houses. You know, when your house starts burning, people usually leave. You know, the first responders, we're not going to stick around to that point.
Now, as you take a look at this video, this is what we saw when we drove into our location about 25 miles away from the volcano's summit here in the lower rift zone. And we were just told that there was an eruption this morning, and that's what you're seeing right there. Ash clouds in the sky by about 13,000 feet. And I would say the air out here definitely feels and smells a little differently. A short while ago, you could kind of smell that ash or burning sensation out here. And part of that reason we're smelling it now compared to other days is that authorities say the winds out here are shifting. So they're warning folks to be on the lookout for not only ash, but also for those sulfur dioxide levels that could be increased today. Connell?
You know, those pictures, Jeff, in and of themselves are something else. But what's it been like for you just to get that close, to all the lava?
Yeah, we went on a tour yesterday with the Hawaii National Guard. They try to get us to some of these locations to give people a sense of reality of what's going on. And I would say when you're close to this lava, it is incredible, and you can feel the heat, and it almost seems fake, like you're watching a TV screen. But I would say the part about this that is the most real and is so hard to capture are the real people. You see the lava flowing, and you look to the side, and you cannot but help but notice there's a family home there. There's somebody's property. There's something that people have been working for their entire life. So it's something that we can't forget when we're seeing these images and incredible images of Mother Nature, that this is impacting, real people that will be dealing this for quite some time.
Yes, all too real. Terrific reporting, Jeff. Thank you for that. Jeff Paul in Hawaii for us. Arthel?
Connell, we're remembering our fallen heroes on this Memorial Day, and we'll show you how the president is paying tribute to the brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. That's up next.